Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. It's meteorologist Brad Panovich. It's a hot, humid day out there, and this evening it could all end with some strong and possibly severe storms. If you watched me yesterday on the news, I talked about the severe weather threat that was possible for the mountains and foothills, and how I thought it would be extended down into the Piedmont. And sure enough, this morning wake up and it looks like Storm Prediction Center kind of agrees now and is going to expand that severe weather outlook into the Carolinas a little bit further. Let me show you first the overall picture here. You can see our cluster of storms to the north. I'm going to zoom in. I put the radar and satellite together here because there's two distinct clusters of storms, and I'm going to stop it right about at the end here. So real carefully, if you look, you got one little cluster of storms here, one up in here. Now this one is likely going to stay up here in Virginia, but this one is going to drop down into the mountains and foothills by evening and then move down across the Piedmont as we get into the late evening hours. Ahead of it, we've got full sunshine and temperatures very, very warm. In fact, let's switch over to the other radar. This is just radar together, and you kind of see the frontal system. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw on the surface temperatures because I think this is kind of important, how warm and humid it is ahead of this system. And I'll stop this right here, see if we can't show you at least the dew points in a second here to show you how hot it is already this morning when I'm recording this at around 9:30ish in the morning. You can see the low 80s and even some mid 80s showing up. Let me throw the dew points on there. These are crazy high dew points. Look at the dew points in Charlotte. Low and mid 70s. This is about the highest you're going to see the dew points. Now, this is a true measure of how much moisture is in the air. This also is fuel for thunderstorms. Combination of hot, humid air at the surface and cooler air aloft sets the stage for really severe weather. We call that instability. So the more fuel we have, obviously that's a good setup, but with the upper level energy coming in from the north and west, which is associated with this thing, that's when it's going to kick fire all the activity this afternoon. So let me show you the severe weather outlook for today. You could see ahead of that system, we've got a high risk up here in parts of Virginia, eastern Virginia, the Tidewater region, and then we move into the Carolinas, and we got a huge area in that medium threat now, and that comes all the way to Charlotte, and even the low threat goes all the way down to the Columbia area. So that's the updated severe weather outlook, and it could shift even more. Let me show you Futurecast, and we can show you what this is going to look like by later this afternoon. All right, here's the short range guidance. This is that high resolution rapid refresh model. We use this a lot in severe weather because it updates every hour, so it kind of self-corrects. This is a really good idea to kind of give you the timing, but I will caution, any model guidance you look at, it's just guidance. It's not a specific forecast. So the storms won't be exactly where they are or that severity. It kind of gives you a general gauge. So that's what I like to use for timing more so than specific. So let's go out in the future. This is 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon. You can see the storm starting to bubble up in eastern Tennessee. We'll go to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. This is where things start to get a little active. Severe storms moving into the mountains likely, and then isolated storms breaking out across the Piedmont by 4 o'clock. Things are starting to get real active. So this is a little bit quicker than yesterday. It looked like it'd be more of a late evening thing. I still think evening is probably the biggest threat because that'll maximize the heating of the day also with the arrival of this. So the timing could be off by an hour or two, but I think the 3-4 o'clock time frame is when things start to get going. But as you watch here, you'll see things 5-6 o'clock is when things are really most active, especially across the Piedmont from Raleigh, Greensboro to Charlotte down to the Greenville area. And it looks like a pretty good line of storms right around dinner time, and then moving off to the southeast through 6, 7, 8 o'clock. So a couple hours earlier than what we saw yesterday as this was pushing through. So I'll loop this a couple of times. And remember, the time is up here in the corner. So if you ever wonder what time this is, right here in the upper part of the corner of the map here, it shows you the model time. So this is 5 o'clock. So when I show you this, this gives you an idea. 5 o'clock, that looks pretty nasty right there. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. They look to be fast movers. So I think on that time scale, at least we're not looking at a flash flood threat, but with thunderstorms, they could produce very heavy rain over a short period of time. One of the things I'm watching for is potential for a couple isolated tornadoes. This has got a little bit more of a tornado threat than we normally see, and I'm going to go back to our severe weather outlook. You saw this risk. Now I can break this down by category. So the first thing I'm going to break it down is we'll do wind first, probability of wind, and you could see the probabilities of wind, if I explore this, this is up around the 30% range. This yellow is a 15% chance of damaging winds, and the brown is a 5%. So clearly, a tornado threat's not our highest. It's really straight line winds. But I did want to show you the wind and hail as well. So here's the hail probabilities, almost none. So this doesn't look to be a big hail setup, but I want to show you the tornado probabilities. Because right now it looks to be very low just to the north. So you're looking at a 2% chance in this area in green. Okay, so the tornado threat is what we call non-zero. Down here, you don't see any shading because it's less than 2%. Now, a lot of times people say 2%, that's not a big deal. But remember, we're talking about a tornado. This isn't a 2% chance of rain where the outcome is you just get wet or get soaked without an umbrella. This is a tornado. So the impact of this 2% is much different than rain. So I know sometimes it's difficult to treat it like a rain chance. It's really a tornado chance. Any of these probabilities of severe weather is the chance of you seeing that within 25 miles of your house. So it's a point on the map that we're looking at, and your house is a point on the map. So tornado threat overall is pretty low. Hail threat is non-existent. When we look at the wind threat, there's your wind threat, and you can see it's in the 15% range. So that's by far our highest probability of seeing some damage today. But I do want to show you another product, and this is what we call the updraft helicity. So this basically shows rotating storms. Now, when you hear rotating storms, that can mean tornadic, but it usually means severe storms because rotating storms produce damaging winds and hail because it drives that hot, humid air we have today high into the sky. Think of it like a screw. And when you get that spin, it drives it way up there. Eventually it gets cold and it's got to come down. And that crashes down either hail, in this case, damaging winds because cold air becomes heavy and dense and wants to come crashing back to the ground. So we'll go through time here. This is 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. You can see at 5 o'clock, there's a few storms that have some rotation. One up here towards the Statesville area, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. But overall, that's not, if this was springtime, we wouldn't even be worried about this. But for the summer, this is a little bit more rotation than we typically see. Like none of these really jump off and say, hey, big deal. This is pretty typical. Looks like your typical severe weather setup overall. But I will show you the CAPE or that thunderstorm fuel building this afternoon. I'll go back. You could see that there's these big swath of very good thunderstorm fuel that builds across a big chunk of the area, and shear, which is another parameter we look at, higher up in Virginia, but you can see some patterns down here towards Charlotte with some higher shear levels. So today, again, we'll just recap real quickly. We'll go to the categories there. There's our severe weather outlook today. If I put this into motion, it looks to be the peak time right around 5 o'clock this afternoon and into the evening. Now, of course, I'll have you covered. If any of these things change, stay tuned to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'll post updates throughout the day and into the night. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.